Well, hello there. It's been a while. We're on chapter 17 of the Ministry of Ordinary Places. I hope this finds you well and happy and getting closer to your God. Yeah. Chapter 17, the discipleship of sticking around. Sorry. After we adopted Robert nearly 5 years ago, moving him into what forevermore shall be Robert's room in our basement, there was a short but ready line of people waiting to warn us about all that might go wrong. Concern was raised over the little kid's safety, my safety, the general foolishness of claiming a 19-year-old boy with a felony as our own. We were dauntless. Looking back, there has been infighting, outfighting, plenty of late-night kitchen fighting. Yet, though we are no strangers to blame, guilt, ridiculously unfair expectations, outlandish entitlements, all mine, unexplained mood swings, minor setbacks, monstrous pitfalls, our certainty has never been overrun with doubt. Yes, we have all had to take a crowbar to our forecast for the future a time or two, but not once, under the cover of even the darkest night, have we harbored a crumb of regret. We give each other the blues sometimes, that's for sure, but we are among one another's greatest adventures, with each other to the blistering brilliant end. Are you disciplining him? Some have asked. I'll admit, on the other side of my pride, their question had me wondering. I was brought up thinking discipline had to involve a workbook, a highlighter, accountability partner. By that definition, no, we weren't disciplining Robert or anyone for that matter. But were we doing enough? More often than not, my daily quiet time consists of walking in my neighborhood, caramelizing onions, and chasing the moon. Who am I to be trusted with such fragile work? I was sitting at the kitchen table working one afternoon when a commotion tore through the quiet. Two frustrated parents walked down the sidewalk trying to get where they were going when one of their little kids suddenly realized with alarming urgency that he indeed did have to go potty. It couldn't possibly have escaped my attention. Hard at work writing my first book, Falling Free, the process was systematically stripping me of everything I thought I knew about writing. On top of that slight speed bump, I also lacked a solid grasp on the very life I was writing about. The shaky pearl we seemed to be slumping toward, or the perplexing gratification it brought us. All I knew was that I was hungry to get to know the people near me, and for an introvert with deep mind-my-own-business tendency, this vast instinctive departure from my personality was proof of God. So at least there was that. When the young family passed by, it might as well have been Jesus himself standing with his mouth pressed against the window screen. Hello, can you hear me? Riddled with self-doubt, as always, should I just mind my own business? I opened the door and invited these perfect strangers into my bathroom, which is to say, into my life. We didn't trade names or numbers. The whole event felt pretty inconsequential. 2 years later, I was passing the peace with everyone else at church when a woman approached, wrapping me in a hug while I scrambled to figure out who she was and why she seemed to know me. I'm Heather. We used your bathroom that one time. She pointed to a blonde-headed toddler clutching at her leg. This is Matthew, the baby I was holding that day. And just like that, she was back. Like so many other Jennifers who show up, wander off, and circle around again when we least expect it, we're still here, right where they left us. They're boomerangs bearing the image of God. It always feels excessively lucky, like spotting an elusive yellow cardinal singing from my tree, or discovering a shroud of turquoise sea glass the size of my thumb in Lake Michigan surf. This is a weird way of discipleship. Eugene Patterson defined discipleship as a long obedience in the same direction. Here, discipleship hinges on enduring proximity, worshiping God, serving our community in joy, sticking around for the long haul, and walking together toward a better place. In practice, it's guaranteed to frustrate, annoy, and inconvenience us. This is sanctification, the wrecking ball and the rebuild. Knowing all this asks of us, do we really want to play a bit role in the discipleship of those near us? Is this slow and hidden work reason enough to endure? And can we possibly begin to see ourselves as among them, modern day versions of a scrappy, power-grabbing, greedy, disorganized brood of regular men with whom Jesus traveled through life? White collar, blue collar, no collar at all. There was no rhyme or reason for their thick loyalty to one another. They bickered, they shared meals, probably wore each other's tunics without asking. If their discipleship was anything like the one playing out around me, they bummed a few bucks, didn't pay it back. They spaced birthdays and teased too hard. They cried together, pointed out each other toward healing and belief. They hugged it out. They doubted and trusted. And at night, they sat around an open fire and laughed their heads off at the events of the day. They rallied together and took turns doling out the patience of Job. We're kidding ourselves when we think too formally about our central purpose to reflect God's glory onto those around us. It is in the spoons and forks of everyday living, at the dinner tables, minivans, the text message confessions, and songs we can't help but sing out loud together, that we are drawn to the heart of Christ. He is oxygen, soil, sun, rain. He surrounds us, and the narrative uniting us is one in which we constantly take turns pointing. Here he is. Growing hardy roots in the soil of Fifth Street means accepting that people will come and go. And this is neither my fault or my concern. We'll be right here when they need us, easily found. It doesn't matter how much time has passed or how much heartbreak has been dealt. I want them to remember the little white house hugging the curb here on an unspectacular street on the wrong side of the tracks. Most of all, I want them to remember their claim on it, drawn in by a magnetic pull of a God who multiplied dregs into abundance, designed the constellations, and will do whatever it takes to heal us. A wider circle family cannot be chosen, not really. It also can't be abandoned. Not really. 3 nights ago, our rowdy crew tromped down the alley into a snowstorm for our Christmas Eve candlelight service. Before I made it into service, Heather grabbed my arm and stopped me. Hold on a minute, you got to see this. She scrolled through her phone for a few seconds and turned it toward me. I just had the best day of my life, she said, beaming. There on the screen was a photo of her, her husband, and one of her 7 kiddos, a 2-year-old with his mama's eyes. Though custody hasn't been returned to her, she's doing the work. She's fighting for their well-being by fighting for her own, clinging to sobriety one day at a time, noticing God's presence in her tiny rental home, surrounding herself with people willing to lace up their gloves on her behalf. This is the first time we've ever had a picture together with me and her dad and his dad sober. I can't help looking at it. Heaven came down and the whole earth was filled with his wonder. Thousands of years later, in the city of Goshen, a manger miracle was reborn. Jennifer raced off to rehearse with our small church choir where most of the members were over the age of 80. I just stood there smiling, glad to be there for the encore. A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices. 5 years in, I don't want to guess what any of our friends might have gained by having us around. I can only say that through them, we have a truer vision of loyalty and perseverance. Our kinship has shown light in the corners of our faith that have long frustrated us. Drawing near one another in our ordinary lives, clanging against theirs, and what results is a punchier, jazzier, more wonderfully complex version of ordinary living that glints with the light of the extraordinary. We're still us. They're still them. A wide conglomeration of quirks and faults. Nothing fancy or dramatic, just the collusion of humans doing their level best. Our suffering is now tangled up with their celebration. When they're in pain, we feel the burn. When they're hurting, they hold a cool hand of hope against our foreheads until it seeps beneath our skin. I've acquired a taste for their stripped-down, daily bread faith, far more satisfying than I ever could have imagined. These days, this is how I'm fed. Only when discipleship becomes most vital to my everyday life did I stop to consider how woefully I'd been doing it wrong. It's safe to say our strategy would leave the pillars of many churches swaying precariously with worry. In any case, I'll go ahead and share. The Martin Discipleship, MO, is heavy on basic togetherness and light on workbooks. I tell people often that I'm praying for them. I talk to them about my life in the exact way I would talk to you, my faith, a natural central part of it. Out of the gates, we don't invite our new friends to church. We don't lead with pointing out their sin. We don't immediately tell them their lives would be better with Jesus. We spend time with them. We give them rides. We watch in awe as our world is lit by their impossible resilience. They show us the face of Jesus, tear-tracked and determined. We tell them as lavishly as normalcy allows that God loves them and created them with a purpose. We tell them we love them. We find cause to be proud of them, at times mining great depths for that one true gem, and yammer on about it well beyond reason. We expose our flaws and look for opportunities to share our worst failures in order to paint the clearest picture of God as our escape hatch, saving us more than once from the brink of ruin. Paul gave physical shape to the gospel commandment to love our neighbor broadly and boldly, knit together by strong ties of love. Above all, he wrote, clothe yourself with love. To reflect God is to reflect love, so that's where we begin. God is fierce and wonderful. He holds every one of us in his hands. I can't do any of that, but I can love. Not as well as he does, not as perfectly or completely, but it's within my job description to hope for those around me with a fierceness that radiates into the cold, shocked corners of their hearts, and to be warmed in turn by their hopes for me. We stay in such close proximity that our shoulders couldn't help but rub, transferring pieces of ourselves, of Christ in us, into each other. The big work is all his. We're just lucky to feel the temperature rising. A week ago, there was a tap on the door so faint, I almost talked myself out of hearing it at all. On the other side was Jason, a young friend I so often lose sleep over. He's looking for Corey, but that day he was willing to settle for me. We stood on the porch for a couple of minutes, struggling through an off-brand of small talk, made difficult due to a slight language barrier, or more likely from the fog of depression and his attempts to self-medicate. My heart lurched into my throat as he looked past me and stared at the street, ready to leave. And that was when the Holy Spirit stood guard on our tiny patio, blocking his exit as I let loose with discipleship of unforeseen affirmation, cramming in as much as possible before the weight of love would scare him off. I ain't used to people saying nice shit about me, he had told Corey the previous week. We're up for the challenge of changing this. He didn't break eye contact as tears tracked a course down his chin. Decades of shame splashing into his bright Nike tennis shoes. We love having you around, I said, and I meant it. Stealing a page from Father Greg Boyle's playbook, I reminded him he is exactly who God had in mind when he made him. Your friends have betrayed you, but maybe this is God having your back. We love you. We're rooting for you. God made you with a purpose and will do whatever it takes to help. And then he was gone. When we heard that same quiet knock, late on Christmas night, he didn't want to come inside. With a quick hello and a Merry Christmas, he hugged Corey before he left and disappeared again. We know we'll see him again soon. He knows where to find us. I can't scientifically prove that any of this matters. I can't plot his faith journey on a timeline, and I sure can't point to our place in it. Church experts and authors more theologically astute might say this doesn't amount to much or count for anything. Have you prayed the prayer with him? Has he made a commitment? Are you discipling him? All I can tell you is that Jason has been stitched snugly against the interior wall of my heart, along with so many others. His inevitable return is the blossom of discipleship, however long it takes. We'll wait here with the good news of his belovedness like a hot cup of coffee on a cold December night. There's simply nothing that can be done about this at any point. I get twitchy when people make assumptions about my life from a safe distance, glowing or otherwise. The truth, of course, is that I'm a regular woman, constantly trying to keep the pull of the world at bay. I love Jesus, and I prefer my view from his perspective. So I do what I can to yank his eyeglasses. I'm no different than the rest of us, and at the center of my soul, I trust that, given the chance, most of us would find ourselves smitten by the nourishing love of the neglected people nearby. We come closer, moving past our old judgments and on to the space where we understand why Jesus spoke the Beatitudes and stood with the least powerful at every turn. Even better, we experience him in ways that capsize our vision for safety, contentment, and basic, astonishing grace. We keep wanting more, and there's no use fighting it. This is not about leading my neighbors to Christ. Rather, it's about settling into my truest state of smallness and allowing them to walk me straight to the places where he sits. My friend Jessica has a sort of kind eyes that make me want to lay my head on her shoulder when I'm having a bad day. She's known the desolate landscape of struggle, hunger and wanting to blow through her life like a gale-forced wind through a tiny, thin cotton jacket. But when she looked at me one evening and said, "We get to be fascinated by God every day," I believed her. My long obedience is to stay put, a fixed point in a swirling sky, planted here until I'm told otherwise in order to reflect the light that snaps the darkness. This isn't exactly the view of discipleship I was taught, but it's very much the one I'm learning to live, where interruptions happen without warning and where I occasionally find myself dicing potatoes for dinner while praying fervently for an impromptu drug intervention going down a couple of streets over for someone we dearly love. Sorry. I don't want the old way back. When that friend falls deeper into despair, I want to be sitting on my couch, fielding desperate text messages. I want Corey to hop in his car at 10 o'clock at night, drive through the city trying to hunt him down. I want our prayers for him to be the last thing on our lips as we drift side by side to sleep. Weeks later, when his eyes are clearer, I want to be there beside him again at church. I want him waving at me from across the street while I'm running errands. I want him to be with us Christmas Day. Discipleship looks like my parents' little country church in the middle of the woods, meeting each week to serve the 14 kids who attend their Awana Club. There is no hype faithfulness, loving people who can't exactly pay them back with no regard for quantified growth and no longing to be cool. They just show up. They stick around. They trust their long roots will yield fruit. Discipleship looks like my friend Adam, the founder of a Christian nonprofit formed around mentorship. When the teenagers in his urban Atlanta neighborhood said they needed better schools and committed teachers, he handed over the reins of the nonprofit and went to work as the chemistry teacher at their failing city school. As a result, his flexible schedule has lost its snap. His wife, Rebecca, now bears a heavier load at their nonprofit, Blueprint 58. In many ways, he's climbing Mount Everest wearing flip-flops and a lead vest. But these are the ones he loves, and this is what they need. Serving them by the glow of a Bunsen burner probably isn't the ministry he envisioned, but it's essential, and it's enough. Discipleship looks like my weekly coffee shop sister, Becca, who surprised herself yet again by taking a part-time position in the new homeless shelter in our city. She called after her shift on Christmas Day, saying it was the best Christmas morning she had had in years. When you spend time with a bunch of people who don't really belong anywhere, you yourself don't really belong anywhere, you sort of realize that you belong together. Just as Jesus instructs us through the parables, we lead by our stories. I want the search party story, the lighthouse story, the living at the end of myself story, where I link arms with the ones I love and we stand together, one foot jammed against the cross, the other on the cold stone floor of the empty tomb. I want a story of beating heart interdependence with the saints all around me, sharpening each other as we walk together through life, every day a bit closer to the heart of our Father. I want to stay sunk in the story of God, shaping my last splinter of hope onto a sturdy lifeboat, a bridge worn smooth by His goodness, a faith that's warp-proof. This is the long-haul discipleship, and this is why we stay. The end of chapter 17. Next time, chapter 18, Better Homes and Gardens. Bye.